What's going on, guys? Dan from SSG bringing you another Edison format deck profile. This time I'm profiling my take on Machina Lightsworn. Let's get right into it. We have the full 3 copies of Gear Frame, of course. We are going to be playing this card as early and as often as possible. This card is very powerful. We're going to get our +1s that way. We have 3 copies of Fortress, all 3. We want to have access to this card, of course, by milling it with our Lightsworn monsters or by searching it with our Gear Frame. Very powerful here. We move on to all 3 copies of Machina Force, and just like I mentioned with the milling, we're going to try and mill our Fortress into the graveyard, and then whenever we draw this card or search it by Gear Frame, this is going to be a easy, instant Machina Fortress out of the graveyard. So we're running all 3 copies here. Very, very strong. We then move on to our Lightsworn-based stuff. We have 3 copies of Hamster. We just want to be a grinding deck really early in the game. This card is very good at enabling some very 1-for-1 and +1 based strategies, and I think this is definitely no exception here. This card is very, very good in this deck, and this deck is very good at grinding people out. Of course, comboing with the Hamsters, we have all 3 copies of Yugioh here. Very good. We're just going to trade our cards, and then we're going to try and trade all of our opponent's cards and then just beat them down with a Fortress, and being able to really deny your opponent of all their cards and then go into a 2 cards versus 2 cards or 3 and 3 game state with a Fortress in play is very, very powerful. And of course, Yugioh is going to be a good way of trading down cards. 2 copies of Lila here. I like Lila quite a bit. There's a few ways to protect it in this deck after you do activate its effect, but it's likely just going to be a 1-for-1 where it just dies after you pop a card, and then it's going to mill some, hopefully, some Fortresses for you and into the graveyard. But overall, this card's very good. I think it just answers a lot of problematic things, and also just a very solid card, very powerful normal summon. So 2 copies of Lila. Moving on, we have all 3 copies of Caius here. This is a Yugioh Caius deck where we want to drain our opponent's resources down and then enable our Machina Fortress into play. And Caius does a great job at that. You can easily have boards like Caius plus Fortress when your opponent's very low on cards, and they can just run away with the game like that. So very strong triple Caius here. Hamster Caius is very, very strong, where you're going to play all 3. We have 1 copy of Card Trooper, just a solid way to mill cards into the graveyard. It's also a machine you can discard along with your Machina Fortress to reborn itself. Very strong card in Card Trooper. It can just do a lot of great things. I mean, people kind of sleep on this card, I think. This card is extremely powerful. It's my favorite card of all time. It can replace itself. It attacks directly for 19, trades with Alias at a +1 rate. Very, very powerful, and just another card that's similar to an Upstart Goblin type of card, just being able to replace itself. It's very strong, and it just does so much for this deck and many other decks alike. We have a copy of Gors and Tragodia here, of course. Gors and Trag, really strong. One of our main lines of defense here is the 2 hand traps, and very good cards. They're going to help us set up for Caius. This deck doesn't play too many ways to set up for Caius, but these definitely do go a long way. And I like playing these Yugioh Caius mid-range decks in some sort of layered fashion, where these cards can be one of the layers your opponent has to slog through and fight through for their cards, and then at the end you come down with Machina Fortress and they just can't handle it. So these cards just help you play in a very layered way, which I think is very powerful in Edison format and in most old school formats in general. So very good cards that do a lot for us. And we are running 1 copy of Plague Spreader Zombie, just really good. I think I like to play this in any deck that features Lila. I like the ability of popping a card and then having an extending play out of the graveyard. Very strong to synchro with our Lila there. But we're just going to be milling this card and also drawing it fine, as we can potentially summon it after a face-up Hamster flips over. We can make some sort of a play with it. So of course, Plague Spreader, very good card. Onto some spells here. All 3 copies of Book of Moon. I just like all 3 books right now with the Hamster Yugioh package. Especially with Lila, you can protect it and then sack your Lila for Caius, sort of at a +1 rate, getting the +1 with the pop, and then sacking for Caius, really strong. But this card just does a whole lot of work. It protects Fortress from bigger monsters. Just does a whole lot of different things, and being able to protect for Caius is really strong in these Yugioh Caius decks. You can also just play more of a controlling game with the Hamsters and Yugiohs, just getting value off of those to get card advantage and then build up towards having that big Machina Fortress win. 3 Book of Moons. All 3 copies of Pot of Avarice. I've been between 2 and 3 on this card, but I just love 3 in Hamster decks. being able to just have this card so live so early in the game is very powerful. But also, recycling all of your Machina forces into the deck is extremely strong, and even Gear Frame to go search those forces. So I think, you have so many live draws that you can put back into your deck that are just so high value that I like all 3 pots for that reason. And it's really easy to enable. A lot of your cards just get multiple cards, whether it be Raikou milling multiple things, you have Lila milling multiple things. Of course, Hamster into Raikou just pretty much enables this card almost by itself. You have a lot of ways to get monsters in the graveyard, whether it be Gear Frame, adding a card to hand that you can then discard for Fortress, something along those lines, and 3 Avarice is going to be really good for us in the late game. We have Charge the Light Brigade, of course, just very fast card that gets us access to Lila or Raikou, very strong card that we want to play. Brain Control, very self-explanatory here, Caius, Fortress OTKs, things like that. MST and Heavy, to when we do want to make our pushes, we do want them to go through, so these cards just clear the way. Onto some trap cards. We are sort of a mid-range deck, so we're going to play some traps. 2 copies of Bottomless Trap Hole. Very strong card, very reactive to what our opponent is doing. Bottomless is going to get it done most of the time. We then have Torrential Tribute, a very good mass removal card, as well as the Mirror Force. Solemn Judgment, I love this card in this deck. You can really set up like boards, like I mentioned, like Caius plus Fortress, and when you set a Solemn Judgment behind a Fortress, it just feels so safe and it feels very good. You're going to most likely win that game, so Solemn just really good in this deck in particular. Last card in the main deck would not be an SSG profile. Without the 1 copy of Trap Dust Shoot, we are going to open this card, and it is going to be quite amazing for us. I love Trap Dust Shoot in these 1-for-1 style of decks, but, I also just like opening it because, it's pretty broken. You get to feel like a lot better than your opponent. They feel kind of sad. You feel very happy. Your win percentage skyrockets, and hey, let's just draw this card on turn 1. Let's just do it. In unison, everyone watching this video, you're going to draw a Trap Dust Shoot when you play this deck. Extra deck, pretty standard here. Army Arm, Catastor, Android, Bryonic, Yugioh. We have Flamethrower Rayquaza. I like Rayquaza in these mid-range Raikou Caius decks because I think these decks can sometimes have trouble finishing out a game, and being able to have that extra piercing angle to your game plan is very good. This plus Fortress, piercing a Dandelion token, then Fortress Direct is a common way to play around Gores. Really strong card here. I like Flamethrower Rayquaza quite a bit. Then we move on. We have Tempest Magician. I love this card so much. You can make this with Lila and Plague, and you can just burn people out. It's similar to the Rayquaza in the sense that you could eventually run out of cards. You could basically run out of ways to actually damage your opponent in a really simplified board state. This card just gets it done. I love Tempest quite a bit. We then have Black Rose Dragon. We can barely make this, but it's very powerful, so we will have it in there. We have Stardust Dragon, Colossal Fighter, Dark End Dragon. This card can come up. We have Thought Ruler Archfiend, Red Dragon Archfiend, Mistworm, and Chimera Tech for the Cyber Dragons on the sideboard. Onto the sideboard, I have 2 copies of Cyber Dragon, 2 copies of the Crow, an SSG staple if you've ever seen one. These 4 to 5 cards, very strong in our decks. 2 copies of Warrior. DD Warrior Lady is pretty strong. I think a lot of people tend to main deck 1 or 2 copies in the main board in these machine Lightsworn based decks, but I like it on the side. I think you have a lot of removal in the main deck that it could be a little bit overkill. It's also another normal summon you're adding to Hamster, Raikou, Card Trooper. You have Gear Frame. A lot of things you want to normal summon. This card could clog up a little bit, but in a lot of matchups, this card is going to be excellent for you, like in the hero matchup where you can really run them out of threats. Very strong here. We then have 1 copy of Nobleman. I kind of just been including 1 in a lot of my sideboards. I just don't want the zombie decks to be able to go first, set their tomato or turtle or goblin zombie, and then just kill you on the following turn. It's really annoying. Just being able to cut them off from their zombie engine sometimes is very strong, and also against random decks like Gravekeepers and other Raikou decks, you sometimes do want to just get rid of all the flip effects. So card's really good, just does what it's supposed to do. 3 copies of Pulling. This card has just kind of been staple for me at 3, man. So many cards and decks just play like this. They're playing Caius, they're playing Diva, they're playing Swap Frog, they're playing all these enabling cards that are so early in the game come down and have such a high impact that I think enabling, trying to get rid of those enablers is very, very powerful. As well as when we're setting cards like Hamster and Raikou, we just can't have them being Caius. It's such a negative tempo swing that we really do want the 3 copies of Pulling the Rug to be preventative in that way as well. We then have 2 copies of Deep Prison just in the sideboard against some of the more slower decks where we want more interaction, we want more ways to stop attacks. I think Fairies is a good example where they can start crashing and go into Christia. We're going to add these in, and card's going to be good. It's good in the main, good in the side. 2 in the sideboard this time around. We then have 2 copies of Dust Tornado, just trying to get rid of problematic cards. I like signing this in against decks where I feel like we need to be a little more aggressive with our Machina Fortresses. Just get some backwards out of the way, make sure we get in our pushes in, and like shorten the game a little bit in the matchups where we're not favored going super long. I do like the 2 Dust Tornadoes. Last card, I've been liking this card quite a bit. 1 copy of Compulsory Evacuation Device. This card's really good at enabling, like, getting over, like, basically pushing through damage with Machina Fortress, especially when Fortress is dropped down in addition to a normal summon. You can really make this card a huge tempo advantage by pushing, like, powerful monsters out of play. Also just really good at taking out things that are kind of problematic for us to deal with. Of course, we don't have, like, this can kind of come in combination with Deep Prison to answer cards like Stardust really easily. This card is also very good at getting rid of Absolute Zero. If they try to establish it into like no board, you can just get rid of it, bounce it away. You take no damage from it, no nothing. And yeah, Compulse is very good for us. I think it's been very good for me and a lot of the decks I've been building. So 1 Compulse there. So that is about it, guys. Let me know what you guys thought about in the comment section below. I think the deck is pretty sweet, and it's been floating around for a while, different versions of this deck on various Edison YouTube channels, and I wanted to bring you my take on it because I think this deck is actually quite good. Why are we grabbing Kai's here? But I think Machina Fortress is just one of the better cards that you can really play in the format, and this is an interesting way to do it. So like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you guys thought, and I think that is about it. So without further ado, this is Dan V from SSG signing out.